In progress.
Everybody can see the screen, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Good evening to everyone. Thank you all for making the time to join us tonight for this informational session for the month of May. We want to talk a little bit more about the Latin American School of Medicine in Cuba with you all. I'm Dr. Samira Adri. I'm the program coordinator for the scholarship program that is run by IFCO Passes for Peace, a US-based nonprofit organization. We are based in New York City, but we have been entrusted with the responsibility of administering this full scholarship to interested students who want to study medicine in Cuba. The scholarship is offered by the Cuban government. And so tonight, the presentation is going to take a little bit of a different uh, tone than previous ELAM info sessions. This is going to be centered mostly around frequently asked questions. So we will hit the basics about the program as well as go in a little deeper, so that at the end, if you also have any other questions, you're free to ask them now, and we can have that archived in our recording for anybody else who's interested and who couldn't make it tonight. So you will notice my colleague and veteran IFCO staff member, Emily Thomas. She is under the IFCO icon on this meeting tonight, but she'll be in the chat trying to keep up with things while I do the presentation in case I'm not able to read any questions. Please forgive me, but she'll try to keep up with that. And we will also come back to your questions at the end, okay? So bear with me. If we have to stop in the middle somewhere to engage with you, that we can also do that. This is a relaxed setting, so we will do our best to tackle all of this within an hour so everybody can get back to your busy schedules. All right. So just so we all know, this school, the Latin American School of Medicine, is usually known by its Spanish abbreviation, ELAM, for Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina en Cuba. So you will hear me refer to the school as ELAM throughout the presentation. And it was a school that was founded in 1999 in response to what happened after Hurricane George and Mitch ravaged parts of Central America and the Caribbean. It has a beautiful history that I would want you all to delve into, one, by visiting our website, two, by accessing the previous info sessions that we've had that go into the background and history of this wonderful scholarship program and this school. But also beyond that, to recognize that today is May 23rd, and it is a day that in Cuba, we celebrate the medical collaborations that Cuba has partaken in the world. This is now 60 years that Cuba has sent medical brigades to different parts of the world. And currently that's over 165 countries have benefited from Cuban medical brigades. That's about 600,000 medical professionals that have been out in the world for 60 years, helping in many places that most are hard to reach, and most people have never had any kind of healthcare access. These are the places that our Cuban friends send doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals to go and attend to. And this has happened over the years in times of crises and disasters, as well as in times of peace, where sadly, the reality on a global level is that most of our global health infrastructure is lacking. And so what Cuba has been doing for all these years has been sending many of its health professionals to places in order to build healthcare infrastructure and to also be a source of relief for the places where the burden of disease is very heavy. So we applaud our Cuban friends in their endeavor because of that Cuban medical internationalism. That is the reason why a school like Latin American School of Medicine stands today. And so we hope this medical internationalism will continue for many, many more decades, and that ELAM will also continue in that tradition because it is a school that has been able to graduate since its inception over 30,000 physicians for the world. So that's a small drop in the bucket compared to like what I just mentioned, over 600,000 medical professionals, Cuban medical professionals serving in the world in over 165 countries. So we are proud to be a part of that longstanding tradition of putting people first and putting the needs of the world and its health first. And so this informational session will give you a little bit of an overview about what the program is about and the specific needs that US students may have throughout the program that we're able to tackle as the organization that administers the scholarship. So yes, without further ado, I will go to the first slide. So the first question we always get asked is, what are the requirements for uh, the Latin American School of Medicine? And so many of you to even be here tonight, I'm sure have been aware that there are some basic requirements that we need in order to apply for this scholarship. The first being that you should be a US citizen. You should be between the ages of 18 and 25. You should have a proficiency of B or better in college level sciences with a minimum of a year in biology, physics, general or inorganic chemistry, as well as organic chemistry. And all those courses must be completed with their lab components. You also need to make a commitment to practice medicine in low income and medically underserved communities in the United States after graduation. It's very important for us to note that persons of color and or persons from low income backgrounds are especially encouraged to apply. This scholarship was created to give access to many of us who come from disadvantaged communities and underserved communities here in the United States to be able to attend medical school, because the dream of medical school comes at a high cost, not only for those who can afford it, but especially for those who cannot afford it. And so this scholarship was created to reach those of us who by no other means would be able to study medicine in the United States of America. So again, these groups are encouraged to apply. And it's important to note that in our program, we have a high representation of African American and Latinx community members, as opposed to the traditional model of having more white students than people of color. So this is a program where we also have quite an impressive representation in terms of gender representation. Almost 70% of the students in our program, in our scholarship program, are women. So there are ways in which we are modeling and also representing the larger student body of ELAM, which is a school that is huge, with over 10,000 students spread across the island. But traditionally at the main campus, it's about 1,500 to 2,500 students. And that school is always predominantly of people of color. It's 97% people of color, students representing over 115 countries. So this is a school where we get to see that people of color are the real majority in the world, right? And so it's a beautiful thing to be a part of at an international school like this, because you immerse in each other's cultures and you learn from that. And, it helps you grow as a global citizen in so many ways. So we want to encourage everyone to represent who they are truly and, apply for this scholarship. I do have to say that aside from these basic requirements, We hope that candidates are people who are passionate about medicine, but also serving in underserved areas, wherever it is. We've gotten a lot of questions about whether you're obligated to practice in the United States upon return. This is a social contract. It's at the end of the day upon your own moral volition where you decide to practice after you graduate. But the hope is that every scholarship recipient from this US delegation cohort would return back to the United States and find a community somewhere in this huge country to serve and fulfill all the different healthcare needs that exist here. So there is no fine print, there is no legal document that is going to hold you to this commitment. It is just, trusting in your word and your goodwill as a human being. That's how this program has been and will always be. So we hope that those who have aspirations to serve the people will apply to this scholarship. So what's included in the scholarship? The scholarship includes full tuition, room and board, which covers dormitory housing with bedding supplied and 3 meals a day at the campus cafeteria, textbooks in Spanish for all courses, a small monthly stipend in Cuban pesos, school uniform, which in Cuba is a short-sleeved white lab coat and dark blue pants or skirts. The scholarship does not include travel expenses to and from school, and it does not include the fees for taking the USMLE STEP exams, which I will talk a little bit more about later. It does not include costs for supplemental English language textbooks. However, IFCO has provided a small library of supplemental English language medical textbooks for the use of US students and other students from English-speaking countries. IFCO has also partnered with AMBOS and their Global Health Initiative to provide resources to prepare for the USMLE STEP exams. The next question is, can US permanent residents apply? Unfortunately, no, the scholarship is open to prospective applicants who are US citizens and hold a current US passport. Permanent residents holding green cards cannot apply for this scholarship. So only after you've been granted citizenship would you be able to apply. If you hold citizenship in another country, it would you would have to contact the embassy, the Cuban embassy within your country to see about the availability of scholarships for your country. The next one is, do I need to speak Spanish to apply? No, students are not required to speak Spanish in order to apply for the scholarship. The ELAM program offers a 1 to 2 semester intensive Spanish language course for all non-Spanish speaking students. Do you need a bachelor's degree or higher in order to apply? No, but a high school diploma is required with a copy officially translated into Spanish. In addition, prospective students must show proficiency in basic college level courses with at least a B average in order to apply. I went over those courses before. It should be at least 2 semesters of biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics, all with their lab components. There is no math requirement. I speak Spanish. Will I be able to start first year medical courses right away? No, unfortunately, not quite. There's a different, there's a caveat to that. So there's a placement test that is given to students to measure language proficiency. And then based on performance, students will either start the intensive language course or the pre-med semester studying in Spanish, right? So the pre-med semester is required for all students studying in the program in order to understand the Cuban medical school curriculum and classroom norms. So if you do speak Spanish and you take that placement test, you would then automatically move into the pre-med semester. And then you would have a break before you start your first year of medical school. as opposed to if you do not speak Spanish, then you would have the intensive language course, um, as well as the pre-med semester. So that would be 2 semesters as opposed to 1. So that's the difference for those who speak Spanish, and are fluent in it, as well as those who do not. What is the application process like? So applicants must submit an application form with personal essays in English and Spanish. Again, this is not assuming that you are supposed to be a Spanish speaker beforehand. This is supposed to just try and be an exercise to, number one, engage you in thinking in a different language that you will be learning in hopefully for the next 7 years of your life, but it's also to accommodate uh, the reality that Cuban counterparts will be reviewing your application and would like to know about you. So your essays being in Spanish are for that reason. So it is not a task that is supposed to be difficult for you. We have had experience with people seeking help from their Spanish teachers at their institutions, or anybody who has a Spanish background, to be able to revise their essays for them. And that's been helpful. Of course, we now know there are many digitally advanced ways to translate documents. So you can, I guess, use Google Translate, and that's not the most digitally advanced. I am not the technologically savvy person, but I believe you can also use AI probably now. So all these things that are available, those of you who are savvy, please do use. And when you are able to maneuver those situations, share the information and the good news so we can spread it on to future candidates. You'll also be required to submit transcripts from high school as well as any college courses you have taken. Transcripts, especially if you have taken college courses, we ask that you send in transcripts from all institutions that you've studied at, just so we have a better understanding of your academic trajectory, right? And we also ask for letters of recommendation, 2 of which should come from science professors, and then the others coming from people who know you well and can give you strong recommendations from any of the activities you've been involved in or any of the jobs that you've worked over the years. We ask for a medical history and other documents as well. It's a pretty extensive application packet, which is why it's advisable to, try to reach out to people that you need letters from the get-go, because that may take the longer time for response, and then delving into the tasks that rely specifically on you, such as your essays. Some of the other things that rely on external entities are, for example, a letter of good conduct from your local sheriff department, um, those kind of things. Of course, medical records can always take a little bit longer than we'd like. The passport situation is real this year. There are severe delays, we understand. So if you have to apply for a passport, please do so immediately. We do not know when things will get better in terms of the return process, but keep us posted on that so that we know what your situation is. A personal interview is required in this process. And if you go through the application review process successfully, the first part, you are invited for an interview with the medical admissions committee. And so those interviewers, after that, also assess whether you will be invited later on for the next part of the process, which is a group evaluation. It's a weekend event, about 2 to 3 days, and you get to meet the other candidates who are applying, who have made it as far as you have. And then after that group evaluation, based on recommendations of staff and medical admissions committee members, you're recommended as a candidate to our Cuban counterparts. And then we hear back from them whether you've been accepted or not. And we see you again if you have been accepted at another point for a full-on orientation and then taking you down to school. So MCAT scores are not required for this application process. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, applications are screened by IFCO staff and members of the IFCO Medical Advisory Committee, which comprises physicians and other health professionals. So what is the application deadline and when would I start school if I'm accepted into the program? The deadline is July 1st, 2023. Selected applicants will be invited to participate in a 2-day group evaluation, as I mentioned earlier. This is an essential step in the screening process. When the Medical Advisory Committee has made its final recommendations, the files of selected applicants are submitted to the Latin American School of Medicine and the Cuban Ministry of Health, and they make the final admissions decisions. So those admitted into the program will have an orientation just before traveling to Cuba to begin their studies in February of 2024. 1 second, I think my computer is about to die. And we're back. Okay. So the next question is, how is the academic calendar organized? So the first semester begins in February and runs through mid-July. There is a summer recess from mid-July until the end of August. Classes then resume for the second semester in September until the end of January, with a short break from December 23rd to January 2nd. And there's also a 1-week spring recess in April. First semester exams are given in June and July. Second semester exams are given at the end of January before another school year begins in February. Mid-July to the end of August is the only official academic vacation recognized by the Cuban Ministry of Health. So during this time, US ELAM students are encouraged to pursue clinical and shadowing experiences in the US, as well as prepare for the USMLE exams, the United States Medical Licensing exams, that are required for the practice of medicine in the US. What is the curriculum for ELAM students? Spend a little bit of time, more time on this in the previous info session, which I will be happy to send any of the attendees tonight. But essentially important to know that this is a 7-year program, counting the year of learning Spanish and the basic pre-med semester, right? So that first year, if you do not speak Spanish, or if you do speak Spanish, it would be 1 semester, right? But if you do not speak Spanish, it would be 2 semesters of intensive Spanish, as well as the pre-med semester. And that is what prepares you for medical school in Cuba, because medical school is entirely taught in Spanish. There are no English courses. Your professors may speak English, but they are not going to teach a course in English. So that first year of learning Spanish and immersing yourself in the culture and the norms of the society, as well as the university, is very, very important for your success for the rest of the program. Because then first and second year, you delve into the preclinical courses, the basic medical sciences, everything that you would learn in medical school anywhere in the world is what you start learning in those years, right? So you have your basic sciences like biochem, molecular biology, anatomy and physiology, but then you also have specific courses that are unique to our Cuban education, such as introduction to public health and comprehensive general medicine, which is Cuba's version of family medicine, but has several components of community medicine and public health integrated into it. So it helps us to navigate the world as very capable and resourceful family physicians, but you get introduced to that from the very first year you are studying, right? So That is the preclinical part. And then the clinical years are your third, fourth, and fifth year, where you are based at a hospital, a teaching hospital, and you rotate in the core rotations like internal medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics and gynecology. And then you go deeper into the smaller subspecialties later on. And you also learn unique specialties that are important in Cuban medicine, such as disaster medicine, traditional and herbal medicine. These things are all integrated into our studies because as physicians that are trained in Cuba, being prepared for disasters and response to disasters is paramount. And also arming yourself with the knowledge of traditional and herbal medicine is very, very important in Cuban society and the world, right? So this is where we see that whatever we learn in terms of treatment in a conventional method, we are obligated to learn an alternative in the herbal or traditional method. And when you go to Cuba, you see that even in the pharmacy, there is a herbal or homeopathic section, as well as if you want to go for a conventional medication, you can access that as well. But this is part and parcel of our training, and part of the reason why our training is also unique, because um, you have to subspecialize or take time off from your regular medical school career in order to delve into those topics, if that is what you really are into here, or go into the naturopathic medicine route if that's also what you want in the US, right? So it's different in Cuba. 6 year is also a clinical year, but it is where you are doing a rotational internship. So you are now going to repeat the core rotations you already went through, such as internal medicine, general surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, and peds. And you rotate through those now as a junior doctor under the supervision of attendings and senior residents, all so that at the end of that year, you will sit for a final national exam, um, which is practical and theoretical. And once you finish that exam and you pass successfully, then you will be medicine. So that is the curriculum in a nutshell for those 7 years. How are exams given? So again, this goes back to the unique structure of Cuban education, where number one is very key for me to mention that it is always taught to us from the get-go that we are in a collaborative learning environment, as opposed to a competitive and an over competitive environment that we've been used to or groomed in, especially stateside in the pre-med sector, right? So because it is collaborative, you are your uh, brothers and sisters and neighbors keeper. You are supposed to look out for each other. And if folks are doing great, those who are doing great need to look out for those who are not doing so great, because you might get penalized if you don't look out for those who are not doing so great. That's how the Cuban culture works. You're not given accolades because you are the smartest in the class and your friends are failing. That is not the point. So number one is to distinguish that. It is a collaborative environment. Number two is also to know that Cuba is not in the business of um, failing you because they don't want you to achieve your dreams. That is not what your medical education is about at all. It's not to weed out, um, those who cannot, hang on. That's not the process. Because if you have made it that far to aspire to be a medical doctor, then you have what it takes to stay the course. And so the system is designed to give you as many chances as you need to really consolidate your knowledge and demonstrate that you've understood what has been taught. After the amount of attempts that they're allowed to give, if you are not able to achieve what's required and pass, then unfortunately you have to go. But that is not, it's not, um, it's not a practice that is very popular within our Cuban educational system. So as I mentioned here, there are frequent oral exams that are given in most classes. Written midterm and final examinations are given in all classes. Um, Students who don't pass a final exam on the first try are given 2 more weeks to study and an additional and get additional tutoring and then retake the exam. Um, Very important to mention that your teachers, your professors are always very accessible. Um, it's hard to find a professor who is just too busy to sit down with you and go over things that are challenging to you. If you seek them out, they always try to find the time. And if they can't find the time on campus or in the hospital, then it's nothing for a professor to ask you to come over, um, after hours to their house or on the weekend for extra, sessions to help you get better. So that's also um, part of what, really motivates us and pushes us to succeed, because we have professors and teachers who are very much invested in our success, and they make that clear from the beginning. So the second try of your exam is called the extraordinario. Students who don't pass the extraordinario are able to retake the exam one more time before the start of the next calendar year. And that third try is called the mundial. Students who fail 2 or more Mundial exams in that academic year have to repeat the entire academic year. So this option of repeating a year can only be used once in your 6-year course of study. Many of you who are know and have been through school know that anything can happen to us while we are studying for various reasons. And number one, uh, life does not stop because you're in medical school, right? So there are so many factors that can go into whether or not you do well on an exam or you're feeling up to it. But again, the key is to understand that in the Cuban system, you're seen as a whole person who is very much affected by whatever it is that is going on in your life or in your family or community, whether they're near you or far away, which is in many cases for us, we're far away from our communities and still we are impacted by a lot of things that happen. So this is to help us get over the many humps of life that we will confront over 6 and 7 years of studying. So it's a beautiful system, and I hope you all will apply, and I hope you get in and you study in Cuba. So what is student life like at ELAM? I've gotten this question a lot, and I think trying to summarize it in a brief way is hard, as you can see by the extent of this answer, but try to break it down in like the preclinical years versus the clinical years. So a typical day in your preclinical years would be lectures and labs uh, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You have evaluations on a weekly basis, oral and written, as I mentioned. And it is at the discretion of the professor when you can have any extra evaluations. Weekly visits to polyclinics and consultorios. That again goes back to what I was saying earlier about the unique experience in terms of community medicine, public health, being intertwined in family medicine in Cuba. And so the way the Cuban healthcare system is set up is such that there's a consultorio or a medical office with a family doctor and a family nurse for about 150 families. Every 150 families in every neighborhood have a family doctor and a family nurse that attend to them, right? So from year one, we go to those consultorios that end up serving, feeding into polyclinics, which are bigger clinics, community clinics with different services. And we are required to go to these consultorios and polyclinics on a weekly basis. So we start engaging with our patient population, knowing about what patient care is all about at a community level, practicing our bedside manner from day one. So all these things we start from year one in our experience, but your the required hours that you're supposed to do for these activities increases as you go on in your career, in your medical school career. Then you have the introduction of on-call shift at polyclinic. Uh, this is where you start going at least once a week, starting 4 hours at a time. You could serve in the emergency room, or you could, if you have interest in any particular specialty, shadow a specialist in those specialties as your on-call shifts uh, in the polyclinics. This is interesting because at the polyclinics, you see that subspecialists also show up at least once a week to attend to the community population. Aside from having to go to hospitals, which are bigger institutions, and then institutes of special care, which are at the tertiary level, right? So polyclinics are the home base in the neighborhood where you get to know the people. You get to know your doctors and nurses who attend to those community members, and you work with everyone. And you're supposed to be learning from everyone at the polyclinic, from the nurse to the pharmacist who's working there, everyone that you can go sit in and shadow with, the x-ray technician, anybody you learn from. And they are always happy to teach you procedures and explain things to you. Um, it's a very unique culture in that teaching is very popular, and so much so that a lot of the people that we work with become automatically called profes, no matter what their qualification is, because they're teaching us something. So profe, for short for professor, right? So in Spanish. So that's part of our life at ELAM. We have student apprenticeships in different academic departments. We have different events being organized by the university extracurricular department, like dance classes, um, arts and plastics, social political events hosted by delegations. Um, when I say delegations, these are groups of students that are grouped by the countries they represent. So the US would be a delegation. We would have a delegation from Palestine. We would have a delegation from Angola, et cetera, et cetera. So these delegations host events. There are movie screenings, there are cultural galas, also done by region of the world. We just recently had our Nuestra America gala, where our US students participated along with their friends from other parts of the Americas. So I think I have a video I'll try to show at the end if I can get it up. But it's a beautiful part of being at ELAM because um, the cultures are rich and we all have so much to share and to celebrate. We also have marches that are organized, whether it's May Day, the Latin American Day of Medicine, Medical Student Day, Jose Marti's birthday. Um, some of these are culturally specific to Cuba, but also very much celebrated in the rest of Latin American world. So these are all important marches and events to attend and participate in. There's also Student Research Day, which is organized at the school level, the municipal level, provincial level, and national levels. So the higher up you go, and compete, the more benefits and rewards you get as a student in terms of your academic indices, is where a lot of winners end up distinguishing themselves when they present and they win in different categories. It helps their GPA get higher and higher. So that's also a great thing to participate in. Clinical years, which are 3rd through 6th year, again, are all taught in Spanish. You are by this time you're getting to the point of feeling like you are fluent and you are a mini Cuban in these streets. So it's impressive the transformation that many of us go through in terms of language and our acquiring those skills. So we're able to go on to these rotations at the teaching hospital for different specialties and be very aware of what is going on and engaging with the learning process. You also have, in your clinical years, you'll typically be working from 8 to 4 again on the wards. You have lectures for rotations that are incorporated at different times throughout the week. So it's not as, the schedule is not as hard set as when you were in the preclinical year, but it's still very busy. And then you have on-call shifts that increase in duration. Like I was saying, you start with 4 hours, but by the time you're in 6th year, you're supposed to be able to do a 24-hour shift every 5 or 6 days as a junior doctor in your final year. Then the next question is, will I be able to practice medicine in the United States? Will my medical degree be recognized in the United States? In order to practice medicine in the US, students at the Latin American School of Medicine need to pass the US medical licensing exams. These exams are required for all US students who study in any medical school, whether in the US or abroad. So there are 3 components to the US licensing process right now. There's step 1, step 2 CK, and a pathway application for clinical skills evaluation, right? So the step 1 exam is a computer-based multiple choice exam that focuses on the basic medical sciences. So everything you learned in year 1 and 2, plus pharmacology. And then step 2 CK exam focuses on clinical knowledge. So this is where you are going to be tackling a lot of the rotations that you went through: internal medicine, peds, surgery, OB-GYN. All of that is covered, plus psychiatry, and the rest for step 2 CK. And it's also a multiple choice exam. And then the last one is the pathway application, which qualifies a student for evaluation of clinical skills. So you have to go through a clinical evaluation, as well as also complete an occupational English test. Even though we are native English speakers from the US, we still are required to take that exam. And so those are the components for certification by the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates in the United States, ECFMG. Another important question is the Latin American School of Medicine accredited? Yes, the school is fully accredited by the World Health Organization, the recognized body which confers accreditation to all international schools of medicine. In the US, the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates oversees licensing requirements for medical students who study in schools outside the US. So ECFMG fully recognizes any medical school which is certified by its own government's Ministry of Health. Therefore, students who study at ELAM are considered by the ECFMG to have received a fully accredited medical education. Latin American School of Medicine has also been evaluated and fully accredited by the Medical Board of California, which has the most stringent standards of any state in the US. So this means that graduates of ELAM are recognized fully qualified to apply for medical residency in any state of the US after successfully completing the USMLEs. How are ELAM students accepted by IMGs, by other IMGs? IMGs meaning international medical graduates. And how are they accepted by US medical school graduates? So US ELAM graduates are known for their commitment to humanism as a core belief and practice. They are welcomed by other IMGs and US medical school graduates for their collegiality, as well as their dedication to excellence in patient care. As a result of high evaluation and review scores from patients and supervising physicians, many now serve on medical committees, participate in residency selection, and serve as chief residents. A few are also program directors of residency programs. But we are graduates that are very well received by our colleagues and friends And many of us are working hard in the trenches of primary care in the United States at different levels. So uh, while it's good to move up the ranks, it's also important to emphasize that those who are doing the day to day and not just working 9 to 5, but going extra hours, most likely are ELAM, US ELAM grads, because we care about our communities that we serve. And that's if that's what it takes, that's what we do. Um, can medical students travel legally to and from Cuba? Yes, but it is important to understand the context. So this is something I haven't mentioned yet in this presentation, which is the U.S. economic blockade against Cuba, which is a very defining um, characteristic characteristic when it comes to understanding Cuba um, and its day-to-day struggles um, and its place in the world. This U.S. foreign policy that is meant to destabilize and disrupt life in Cuba has had many restrictions, especially when it comes to travel for U.S. citizens. However, through a lot of the work that uh, parents, alumni did in the early stages in order to ensure that students weren't bullied while they were traveling back and forth. You know, they called on congressmen and women um, and organized. So with all the different alliances from IFCO and all the different members of the Congressional Black and Hispanic caucuses, um, they were able to create uh, a, a certified way and a license, a special license that would be given to students, medical students, to travel back and forth without any issue. Now, this, when you read this explanation that I have, specifically tells you that trouble started around 2004, where there was, under the Bush administration, this idea of trying to um, eliminate the fully hosted category and basically stop medical students from traveling back and forth to study. So after all the pressure that people put on that administration, this special travel authorization was given to students enrolled in ELAM. The Obama administration removed the need for this special authorization. Um, And therefore, since then, it is fully legal for US ELAM students to travel to and from school without even needing the special authorization. But, you know, we are in crazy times. Uh, Policies are not getting uh, smoother in terms of US Cuba relations. That is something that you all as applicants need to be aware of, that that doesn't mean that we are letting up in the fight. You know, if Co-Passes for Peace has a long history of putting up the righteous fight on behalf of our Cuban friends to be able to live how they want to, and for also for the education of the many youths who are benefiting from this program not to be jeopardized by people's malicious politics. So it is very important that you all study and understand and learn what it is that Cuba is going through, has been going through for over 60 years with these policies that have shifted one way or another, but always still trying to affect important parts of Cuban life. Because right now, things are very hard in Cuba. That is a very frank reality. Things are very, very hard in Cuba, and it is very intentional. But it does not stop a lot of us from pursuing our dreams and our goals of studying medicine, because no matter how hard it is in Cuba, the truth of the matter is that the dream and the gift that Cuba is giving so many of us is something that is worth you standing in solidarity with the people and struggling through with them as well, and learning what it is that harsh foreign policies, how they affect everyday people. That's the reality a lot of us are not exposed to. And some of us, I won't even say a lot of us are not exposed to, a lot of us are exposed to the harsh realities of domestic policy. But how we see it played out on the foreign field, we are not as aware of. And for us to be able to take those experiences that we have in Cuba and bridge them with the ones we've had here in the United States or anywhere else where we have family and friends and are who are struggling under oppression, when we're able to bridge those experiences, it makes us stronger in terms of uh, our ability to keep fighting for what's right and trying to change things for the better. Because you do not go through or see your, lovely professors, your the workers who take care of you, everybody going through it along with you, and then come out not changed by it. You will be marked by it some way or another. And so the hope is always that we come out with that spirit of compassion and solidarity to keep things going, not only for ourselves in our immediate circumstances, but definitely and most definitely in Cuba for things to get better so that everyone can live better. So didn't mean to go off on that tangent travel wise, but because I haven't talked about the blockade is why I think it's important to bring that up. Can your family and friends travel legally to Cuba? Yes, they can travel to Cuba. If they're visiting you, they go under the category of visiting relatives. They must make sure they're not staying at any of the hotels and places listed in the US government as illegal. And if anyone is interested in visiting Cuba and possibly ELAM, please contact IPCO. We conduct an annual friend shipment caravan to Cuba, going this year in July, in the second half of July. Unfortunately, the application process is closed now, but every July, usually we have, if it's not in July, it's another part of the year. But every year for uh, over 30 years, there has been a friend shipment caravan taking people and humanitarian aid to Cuba. It is an excellent way for you, your family, and friends to get to know Cuba on a macro scale, and then come see how you and your personal life, if you are a student there, fits in the grand scheme of what Cuba is. So please reach out to us. We can assist in organizing visits for smaller groups as well. So yes. Important to note, if you need an application, request one on our website, www.ipconews.org. The deadline is July 1st so that you can start school in February 2024. If you have questions, email us, please. I will put my personal email in the chat. But yes. And that concludes, I believe, my part of the presentation. And I'm going to open the floor now for you all to ask questions.
There were a couple of questions, but I'll let them ask their own. One was about living off campus while you were studying, and one was about whether you could become a physician's assistant or an RN, or was the program only for MDs?
Okay. Okay. Number one, I'll start with the easy one first. This program is only for MDs. If you want to study other health subjects or professions, they do offer programs, but they are not under the ELAM scholarship program. So they would be programs that you would have to pay for, which are basically self-finance programs, much cheaper than probably what you would pay in the United States for that same education, but they have information. I have to look it up, but if you need information for access to that website in terms of other healthcare professions that you can pursue studying in Cuba, I can look that up and send it to you later. Then the second question is about on-campus versus off-campus living. So School rules and regulations require that as a scholarship student, you live on campus. That is something that is very important, especially in your first few years at ELAM campus, which is pre-med first and second year. Then when you're on the clinical side, you go off to different parts of the country, right? But US students are always in Havana. And this is where quite a few of us have a tendency of living off campus, not in the dorms. That is enforced according to the school administration's preference. There are times where nobody really is bothered that you live off campus. And there are other times where, yes, it is very important that you come back on campus, such as times where there are natural disasters, whether it's a hurricane. For example, also the pandemic was another important time because they wanted to know where everybody was, keep good track of us, and protect us from unnecessary spread of the disease, etc. So there are important moments where it is definitely required and would not be tolerated that you are off campus. But again, that is not the off-campus living situation is complex, right? So I feel like at the end of the day, folks make their independent decisions, but as grown folks, when you make a decision, you must live with the consequences. So you don't follow the rules, it has consequences. What those consequences are, I don't know all of them, nor will I lay them out right now, but yeah. There are very important things about living on campus that are stressful and hard, especially now with all the shortages that are going on with the power cuts and with scheduling of water access for everybody to be able to get some, all real daily challenges, right? And school authorities are always trying to figure it out and make sure they make accommodations for the students as much as possible. But you know, we all know ourselves better and our coping mechanisms in terms of what we can and cannot adjust to. Again, I just want to stress that the earlier years are important, that you do live on campus, because if you are off campus all the time, you lose the rhythm in terms of moving with the rhythm of everyone who's studying and building community, which is an incredibly important component to your experience in ELAM. But those are all things that we must ponder over as individuals, and also not just what is individually acceptable, but what is helpful to the collective is something we have to learn while we're in Cuba. So these are all adjustments you have to make when you get there. And the reality is Cuban school structure and norms and procedures are very different from what US students are used to, especially US students who've been exposed to university level education here. That is not, you don't compare that with what you go through in Cuba. I would say what you go through in Cuba at ELAM campus in terms of rules and regulations on a dorm are comparable to what some people may know as boarding school in, for example, I'm from Ghana. So boarding school experience in Ghana is similar to that, where there are strict rules. You wake up at a certain time. When the water's on, you shower, you get ready, you go to school, you go to class. You don't miss class just because you feel like you don't want to hear the lecture, because your teacher is going to ask where you are at, and you will have consequences for not showing up. Even your roommates will have consequences for you not showing up to class. Your residence hall instructor can come into your rooms and inspect to see if it's clean and hygienic at any point in the week. And you don't have anything to say about it. Your job is to maintain the space as it's required according to the rules of the school. And these are, small things, small details about the sort of things that we have to adjust to, that sometimes we have a very, very hard time adjusting to as US students there. But again, the goal is for you to study medicine, become a doctor, to serve your community and to represent your family and everyone else who's counting on you and loves you. So you keep that in mind always. There are a lot of things that you will stray away from. And there are a lot of things you would advise yourself better on in order to keep the peace. I see Asma's hand up.
Yes, hi. It's actually Asma. But I wanted to first say thank you for such an in-depth session. Literally answered most questions that I had as the session was going along. I did have one question on life after ELAM, because I've done some research on students from other countries like the Caribbean. I think I found some on YouTube, and it gives some good information, but I've been looking for students specifically from the US and I haven't been able to find any. And so I was wondering if you could direct me towards any type of information I can have for that.
Okay, so by practice, we do not share information of students who are currently in the program. Even though we know everybody wants to meet them and get to know them and have a conversation about what life is like, but we save those conversations in our process. Number one, when you're after your interview or when you're invited for the group evaluation, you start to interact with these students and they answer your questions that you have. They share resources that they have about life in Cuba, etc. We always encourage people to look ELAM students up on social media because we know they're there. Some of them have thousands and thousands of followers. So you can find them. They're out there, but we cannot share their contact information just because it's not everyone who is friendly and lovely and wishes us well. So we do not share current student information, but we are happy to help you meet them as you move further in the process. Do we have any other questions? If we don't, I had another document that I wanted to share with you all, which I think is very important and it comes up a lot too regarding the success of this program and what life is like after you finish, right? So the truth is, when this program started, everybody was scared, didn't know if folks were actually going to succeed. And 15 years later, a lot of people have succeeded and gone through this program. It has not come without struggle. Ups and downs have been many, but it's an amazing thing to look at this map of the United States and see where the states in which US ELAM graduates are working. To date, we have 220 graduates. Unfortunately, 3 of whom are deceased, but out of those who are still with us, there are so many who are working as attending positions or completing residency. There are currently, I have to update this, 130 US graduates because we just had a match process this March where 5 people matched, 5 people went into the match, the residency match, and 5 people matched. Typically, the rate of matching is between 88% and 92%. So this one was a good year. It was a smaller group with 5, but it was 100%. So we are proud. And the amazing part is that you had somebody as recent as a graduate of 2022 match, as well as somebody from 2011 class match. So that shows you the span of years out that people can be and still pursue this all the way through, because that is the dream. And so out of these graduates that we have, like I mentioned before, ELAM has graduated over 30,000 644 physicians from 120 countries. That is a lot. And this has, impacts on the world. So aside from those who are attendings and physicians in the US delegation, we also have now is 87 US graduates who work in different capacities in research, public health. I'm sorry, 86 US ELAM graduates who are in other fields, public health, research, education sectors. And most of them are working in medically underserved. How do you get this thing off the screen? Exit, right? Most of them are working in health professional shortage areas. There's 89% who are working in medically underserved areas and populations. When people commit to this program because they say they care about their community, it's because it's real for them. They do care about their community and they return to serve wherever they can to fulfill the needs of the people in terms of healthcare. And of course, such a small number for a vast medical system, it seems daunting, but we know that even in our small numbers, we are making a difference, one community at a time, and changing healthcare. So that's part of the story. You can see there's a breakdown here of the specialties. It's not very big right now, of the specialties that people train in. Majority are in family medicine and internal medicine, but also study peds, OB-GYN. Some have gone into emergency medicine, psychiatry, neurology, people who have other interests in terms of specialty. Nobody's going to shoot down your dreams. You can pursue it all you want. It will require you doing extra work and trailblazing so that other ELAM graduates can follow you. And I think that's what quite a few of the previous grads have tried to do in those different specialties outside of the primary care specialties. They've trailblazed and they've made a way so that others can emulate that later on. So that's important. And this is a list of all the different residency programs that our folks have trained at or are training at. And it's all over the country and listed by specialties. And so you should all understand that you should be encouraged, right? This program started with zero medical expertise from a nonprofit faith-based organization, but has been really supported by a lot of stellar community members, physicians and other healthcare professionals in the medical advisory committee, people who have been in other organizations that have been very important to the development of this program over the years in Cuba. That at the end of the day, it takes the village, right, to raise this child called the ELAM grad. And all of these people have made it possible, especially the ELAM graduates themselves, going through the rough patches in those first few years after graduating to lay the groundwork for many of us to now stand on and be able to reap the benefit. So things like the STEP resources that you have on campus as a student, and workshops, just anything like going over paperwork needs and helping you transition back into the US, going over your letters of your personal statements, or your letters of recommendation that you need for professional work. All of those things have been supported by ELAM graduates, and we are building a stronger village by supporting each other, because that's what it takes to thrive in the system. People have to open the door, you have to walk through it, you have to make sure that you've left an excellent mark so that somebody else can also walk through the same door. And that's what ELAM graduates have done and continue to do. So we really lean on them and are going to continue to lean on them more, because while this is not a medical organization, we are the medical professionals that have been through this program. So we are the ones who have to continue this struggle and make sure that more and more of our disadvantaged youth are represented in medicine through studying at ELAM and coming out as bilingual, culturally competent and humble professionals who are centered in a biopsychosocial model, and really see the people as, the prize and health as the prize. So just wanted to share that with you all.
How can people get a copy of that fact sheet?
I can email it to you because I think I don't know if I can add it to the chat here, but if I could, I will definitely do it now.
Why don't we email it out to everyone?
Yeah, I can email it out to you all, certainly.
And we have one more question.
Yes, Miss Skylar Stewart.
Hi, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm actually in my car outside of a giant parking lot because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss this meeting. But yeah, no, so I had a brief question. When you were going over kind of like the residency schedule, or like I think it was the clinical years you were discussing, and I'm just trying to remember because there was a lot of information thrown that I was trying to take notes on, but there was one thing you mentioned about like at least one 24-hour shift a certain amount of times a week. Now that's pretty intensive. It's not shocking or anything or unexpected or anything like that. But given the position of being like foreign, like especially like American students in a country like Cuba, which is obviously filled with beautiful people, but marred by a history with a strained relationship from where we come from, I was just kind of wondering like what kind of mental health services were offered to students. Just because it seems like based on what you were saying earlier about the the interdisciplinary and like community like based approach to learning, that it seems like the Cuban medical system seems to embrace a lot more than say US schools. I wanted to know like what kind of resources or like kind of safety nets were in place for students who were, I guess, struggling to adapt to that kind of environment. And again, like it's not anything different from like American med schools, but it's always, I always figured I figured it was worth asking.
No, yes, it's
So.
a very important question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and yes, I know the 24 hours seems to be like a shocker, but believe me, by the time you get there, you'll be impressed on how strong you become because you've been building up stamina to be able to do so. But your question is valid because it's not just it doesn't only take a 24-hour on-call shift to break somebody in medical school, right? There are so many different things that happen along the way that affect us. One thing I have to mention related to your question is that Cuban culture is very embracing of us as U.S. Citizens and very kind to us. In fact,
that's very reassuring.
Yeah, you'll be surprised and you'll say, it just busts all the myths that you may have in your head about what it is to be a U.S. citizen in Cuba. But that is, that's the work of IFCO Passage for Peace, the National Network on Cuba, so many solidarity activists over the years who have made it clear that when people meet people across countries, that is when people realize that we don't have anything to do with that US government policy. People, love and respect each other and want to, see each other happy and thrive. That is the plain truth about how relations are in terms of when you're on the ground. Now, healthcare wise, in terms of mental health resources, we know that, especially when it comes to mental health too, you have to have culturally sensitive resources. So within the delegation, we have access to psychiatrists who are part of the medical advisory committee, who you can lean on and reach out to at different points when you need them. But also on the ground in Cuba at the different campuses, there are psychologists who have worked for many years with US delegation students, and so have learned some of the, particularities of our our culture and the way we react to things, and are able to help us also navigate mental health issues. We also, as community of students, try to do things that will add to your wellness, whether it's social events and, different things that will keep you encouraged and keep you connected. But that doesn't go to say that all the bases will ever be covered, because we always can improve in terms of what we are able to afford and offer students. It is hard because you are in another country, and maybe the psychiatrists that we have in our corner here are stateside, but that's the beauty of technology now, is that you can, you can talk on WhatsApp, on video, or by chat. That's an app that is popularly used, or Signal, any of those, or FaceTime, right? That wasn't very much possible in my time when I didn't have easy access to internet on a cell phone or anything. We had to find different ways to cope and different ways to manage ourselves. I was just thinking about that the other day, having to learn to sit with myself with a lot of emotions and experiences, because it costs $1.60 per minute to call home, to talk to a loved one. And so was I going to do that all the time? I couldn't. And so we had to find ways to, sit with myself and self-heal and lean on people, especially, my Cuban family, in terms of the workers and people who looked out for us. That was paramount for my success in the program. And people find different people to lean on. But the goal is always just to be supportive and to protect your well-being. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it really does. Like, you actually went above and beyond. It's like really reassuring. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so I don't see any more hands up. Did I miss something in the chat? I saw one question. Is there a specific type of notarization that is required for the application? For example, jurats, I don't know what that is. Acknowledgement. We just asked that you take it to a notary public to be notarized. I hope that answers the question, Miss Mayawell. Yes, you have your hand raised. You have the floor.
Hi. Yes. So I guess when you take it to a notarizer, at least in my area, they ask what specific type you want, so they can recommend the types, like jurat or acknowledgement, but they can't tell you which one is best. So I guess I can email the question,
Okay.
if that's better as well.
I believe acknowledgement should be fine from it, but please email it to me and then I can see the whole context of the question.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Ms. Schuyler, did you have another question, or your hand just is up? All righty, so I think that brings us to a close for this session. We didn't do too bad. Just under an hour and a half, so that is good, right? And I just want to thank you all again for joining us tonight. We will have the recording and send it out. So if you weren't able to join for the whole time, you can watch it and listen to get the whole presentation. So thank you, and we will be emailing you out the fact sheet and everything else we mentioned earlier. Feel free to reach out to me. My email, I'm going to put it in the chat right now. I'm typically in office on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so if you don't hear from me otherwise on other days, that's why. but I will get to you as soon as I can. Okay. All right, looking forward to seeing your applications. Please don't let anything be a hindrance to your process. All righty, stay blessed.
Thank you. Have a good evening.